Hello and welcome back to the County Chat channel. It's going to be more Ashes related content coming for you today, and shockingly enough, it's a review of the first Test. It's all happened a bit too fast. If you're an England fan, we're already reviewing the first Test rather than watching the highlights of day 4 of the first Test. When you're a Bazball fan or an England fan at the moment. Because not many England fans are Bazball fans as of this current second, the game's probably gone pretty wrong or pretty right if the day's game is over in 2 days. Unfortunately for England, unsurprisingly perhaps in Australia, the Test went pretty wrong. It's a bit of a crazy one. I think England at the end of day 1 were looking in a good place, and then all of a sudden we'd lost a Test match, which I guess is the way when the sort of Test match can move as quickly as Bazball has proven it can. But it's an interesting one to see sort of how it got there. How do we sort of look back at it as England fans or as cricket fans and just try and work out sort of what happened and why did it happen? So I guess I've sort of written out talking points, thoughts, theories, feelings. In many ways, it's a sort of just working it through emotionally as an England fan, trying to work through what caused what we've just seen in many ways. So kind of getting straight into it with just sort of vague talking points I had. Was it just a case of England were just massively overhyped for the series and everything surrounding it, and then just reverted to sort of the oldest habits, or like their most intuitive habits that they had within the start of Bazball? Because again, I think a lot of people have talked about how this summer had seemed like a clever version of Bazball, a more adaptive, a more willing to change strategy throughout the match. But this Test match, it was just the opposite. It was sort of, it worked fairly well on day 1 because it was all out aggression, everything fast, bowl fast, bat fast, and it went well. But that worked for one day, and then it all fell apart when England had to bat again. Australia's bowlers bowled well again on a fairly good service for batting, but also had a bit in it for the bowler. Arguably a good Test match surface, even not service. All of a sudden England were just giving away wickets again, and back to sort of those infuriating sessions of cricket where, especially in this new era of Bazball, England can seem to lose an entire innings worth of wickets in a session, effectively. And of course, that happened in previous series down under, and it was a bit more slow burning and a bit more of a slow death. So I guess it's a difficult one, but to me, basically, it seemed like all the pressure built up. There was so much talk before the series, and they hadn't tried to underplay it, which I think was a good thing from the England side. But I just think they were just too hyped up, and especially after day 1 worked well, it just was like, we'll just do exactly the same thing again. But the reality was the game situation was totally different, and batting time would have been a massive, massive deal in that moment. England's bowlers having to bowl twice on the same day. All of these things are kind of old school Test match wisdom, which have always been talked about and spoke about, and yet it still is not, still in Bazball's world, it's a kind of pushing back against it. I guess it's an interesting one. I guess this series in many ways is a bit of an old against new style of looking at cricket. And it's kind of, Bazball, I think, has been painted in a way in England that it's kind of like, this is the way Test cricket is going and this is inevitable. Whereas teams like Australia, the current World Test champions, South Africa and India are still playing Test cricket in a very much, and not to say old-fashioned, but just in a kind of maybe a modern version of the old game. And I think at the moment, again, it's early on in the series, it's been proved that still has a lot of value. Your bowler's not bowling twice on the same day in a Test match is a big deal, especially when you've gone for 5 seamers. And especially when you haven't done many warm-up matches. So it's an interesting one. And I mean, I use that phrase all the time, but I think in this case, there's so many things that will be said that are interesting ones, because it's hard to say if they're just totally wrong or they just got it very wrong. And that's where the kind of debate has sort of fallen into. And so I think, to me, it was just reverting back to old habits and, again, not being adapted to conditions. Because, again, I think everyone, anyone in the comment section, anyone who makes these kind of cricket content could tell you, from what ex-pros have said and what people have read and all of these things, you shouldn't drive with a diagonal bat. You should either hit down the ground straight or hit square with a pull or a cut shot in Australia, and especially in Perth. And what did, I think at least 4 of the top 5 England batters in the second innings get out to was shots in that sort of diagonal plane. Joe Root inside edging one, Harry Brook caught second slip, Ollie Pope caught first slip, they were all that kind of thing. You're bringing the slips into play. Of course, give Australia their credit. They all three of the bowlers bowled well, I think, on day two, whereas in day one, you could argue Doggett bowled well, but Boland definitely didn't, and Stark bowled exceptionally, whereas in this one, they all just bowled very well, and they were there to to snaffle all the mistakes that the England batters were very willing to throw up to them. So it's a whole. You could go on for hours and hours about it. I think it's an interesting sort of battle between new and old, and I guess that's something we will look to keep seeing throughout the series. And I don't mean new and old; I just mean sort of how you view Test cricket in a way. Does the prevailing wisdom of 100 years of this sport being played over 5 days continue to be proven to be correct, or does this new age work? And especially in a new age where you're trying to sort of do it on wickets which aren't curated for your own success, which Bazball has, I think, leaned on heavily. And I think people have decided to kind of not focus on that. In England, when they have flat, hard surfaces, which they've asked, can we have flat, hard surfaces? They do pretty well. And so, yeah, I can get lost in this easily and for a long time. But another thing, I guess, and I think a word that has been used a lot about this England team is, was it the England making the same mistakes again? But was it just them not being ruthless? Whenever they're on top in a game, England have lost test matches from being on top of a game more than probably any test team I've ever witnessed. Of course, I'm not particularly long in the tooth, but England just seem to always, get in positions where they could win a test match, like after day one, and, lose from those positions. And you think to New Zealand, where they made New Zealand follow on, and they lost. And there's plenty of other situations where that kind of thing, declaring on day one in the Ashes in 2023 was another famous one, and we lost that test match at the Edgbaston. So, yeah, it's tricky to kind of look past it as an England fan. In any other cases, sort of like huge mistakes and huge ways of sort of looking past, again, just old knowledge of the game, and maybe just the sort of how you play Test cricket. I haven't spoken to this point, and I need to say at this point, obviously, Australia still needed to chase the biggest score of the Test match, and Travis Head especially, but also Labuschagne and also Weatherald to a lesser extent. They batted well, and again, the England bowling was a bit wayward, but again, the England batters hadn't given the bowling, much time to rest, and the speeds were down, the accuracy, the consistency was down, but the batters still have to put it away. And Travis Head hit one of the best innings. I think you always should lean on people who were there and people who were watching the game, and people who are ex-pros or current pros in this case. But Nathan Lyon and Mitchell Stark talking about that Travis Head innings, of course he's their teammate, and of course they're going to big him up, and as they should. But they were literally there being like, and they've obviously seen some pretty special innings in their time. Well, like, that is one of, if not the best test innings I've ever watched. And I think it was just because of the extra pressure he was under. He went up to the top of the innings. Had he got out early, Australia would have then taken out their best middle order batter and put him at the top, and then got him out to the new ball. But Travis Head flipped the script, did the opposite, and didn't even make the middle order worry about it. Khawaja didn't have to come in with any kind of back issue, and all of the middle to lower order people like Cam Green and Carey didn't even have to bat because he just did so well. Labuschagne as well, 50 not out. You can't really underestimate that, how big of an impact he had rotating the strike. I mean, he also struck it, I think, almost above a runner ball or around a runner ball. So, again, it was just a textbook in kind of educated aggression, I guess, is the phrase you could use, and I've used before. And again, people have wanted to use for this England team, but there was anything but the educated aggression for England. It was kind of the opposite. And I think Head and Labuschagne proved you can bat positively, and especially in this world of cricket that we're in now, with the bats and all of the things that we know to be true. But you've got to have some basis of sort of tactical astuteness and awareness. And that, if the bowlers are getting tired, make them tired. Make them bowl you a ball that you want to hit. Leave the ball well. All of these things. I literally gave myself like an extra day of like morning on Sunday. I was like, I could do a video today. Bearing in mind it would have been day 3 at that time. But I was like, you know what? It's going to be too raw. And I'm doing this record now on a Monday, and I'm still feeling equally raw about it, because it's hard to kind of get your head around. It feels as if you've been shell shocked as an England fan. So yeah, it's I can't really. It's hard to verbalise these thoughts. But Australia fundamentally on that last day outplayed England to such a large extent that day one was pretty irrelevant. I mean, that's as simple as it was. England had probably one of their worst days under Stokes, and it just so happened to be in the biggest pressure moment. Is that a coincidence? I think a lot of people would say no. And going back to the sort of England batting lineup feeling maybe undercooked and maybe making similar mistakes under pressure, and it comes down to a lot of people say, therefore, is it because you haven't had enough time in Australia that when the pressure starts coming, you play better because you've got used to the conditions, or you're in a position that you feel comfortable out there and you know where your scoring zones are, etc., etc., etc. England obviously played a one-off warm-up game against the Lions at Lilac Hill, which I think everyone has agreed is nowhere near a test surface. It was in many ways actually quite slow and quite low for an Australian wicket, that is, because again, it's a club wicket. Now, I'm sure Cricket Australia, since England won in 2010-11, have made it more difficult to play as extended state games and stuff like that, because I think England played some ridiculous amount of state games when they came out in 2010 and 11 and won. But even still, that feels like a pretty weak excuse maybe for England not taking more time to play in Australia. A one-day series, which was just pretty much half-assed in New Zealand. I mean, we got absolutely hammered by New Zealand, but there wasn't much interest in it. There wasn't much, arguably need for it. And could that have not been another month that even if you were just going to play intra-squad games, you were in Australia doing it, again, at club grounds, or at any venue you could get, which could just replicate it at all. Of course, this is all, had England won the first test, having had day one, day two, day three go well, none of us as England fans or as cricket commentators, for lack of a better word, would sort of suggest that would be an issue. But it's just it's a tricky one when you then lose in 2 days and you have all the very upset England fans who are well within their right to be upset, and all of the things attached to it and all the emotions attached to it, that you start questioning the preparation. You start saying, well, when you're going to deliver this poorly under pressure, and you've not given yourself a chance to get used to the conditions and all of those senses, it's a difficult one to kind of, it gets to have sympathy or be on, almost not turn to be on against you and continue to support in such a wholehearted way that England fans almost always do. And again, England fans always do with cricket. I would say they're very loyal, because the reality is England cricket has often had this kind of high highs and low lows. But this was before Bazball, and just in general, less than like sort of Australia, who've just dominated cricket sort of as long as they've been a test cricket playing nation. Simply put, they've been one of the best teams. England have always had ups and downs, and this is just part of it. And again, like a lot of England fans, and overly optimistic ones perhaps, but wanting to believe in something, is that England still can win this series 4-1, 3-2. Like, it's not impossible. I think a lot of people just found it difficult to imagine not winning this Perth test, especially after Hazelwood and Cummins were ruled out as unfit. And speaking of that, is this the worst attack England will face all series? I think there's a very good chance it is, especially if Cummins is going to be back for the next 4 tests. If you have Cummins and Stark for the next 4, that means it's a better attack than what they had for this setup. As well as, there's a lot of chat in the Australian team that, did Khawaja's back injury actually open the door for them to realise, actually, Travis Head is going to open the batting, and then we can bat Bo Webster at 5, Cam Green at 6, or vice versa? It probably would be vice versa, actually. Cam Green 5, Webster 6. It means they've got an extra bowler. They've maybe got rid of a batter who they're starting to see as a walking wicket is harsh for someone like as Khawaja's prestige, but I think he'd getting to the point where he hadn't scored a run in a long time, or scored runs in a long time. So it's a tricky one, and I think England could have or Australia and Khawaja's back issues could have literally unlocked their best lineup, and then England they're 1-0 down, they're going into a pink ball test that Australia have never lost. I'm pretty sure that's correct. They've never lost a pink ball test at home, and now we've got to play them with Cummins coming back and maybe a rejigged batting order to add some more bowling and probably better batting. It's a hard one to then start feeling positive about as an England fan. Because again, I think a lot of England fans and commentators, pundits, Atherton and Hussain, I think a lot of people said you had to, I think I heard Vaughan say it as well, you had to win the first test because of the fact that the bowling lineup was going to be at its weakest. Of course, England can change how they bat and be more adaptive and be a bit more smart, say, but I think they've proven consistently that that's not something they're in the business of doing, or at least as of recently. So who knows? It's hard to say. This is all. I realise this whole video is going to be me kind of speculating, but I think that is kind of all you can do. without sort of knowing what's going on and what's the plans are being made for England to try and change anything going into the second and third test. And I guess going back to the original, like why this has hurt England fans so much is the phrase, the hope, it's the hope that kills you. Usually in Australia, we've just been dominated from the outset and throughout, and you just go, well, fair enough, they're better than us, and we don't know how to win in Australia since 2010-11. But this series, I think a lot of people went out with a sort of, they've cracked it, they've worked it out. And then day one just proved all of those things. It was a good surface for bowling, moved around a fair amount with some good quality bowlers, and they just didn't hang around for a wicket to get them out. They were aggressive, especially Duckett and Pope looked brilliant, and Brooke looked brilliant. Then the England bowlers bowled brilliantly and got a lot of Australian batters out cheaply and rattled them with some pace. So all of the things that England had kind of been sold the dream by Bazball as to working in Australia played out in that first test match, in the first day even, sorry. Day two comes around, they get the last wicket, everything's looking hunky-dory. Then all of a sudden, again, and if anything, a better batting surface, because they only get better, especially wickets in Optus. It's kind of like the day one can be an absolute field day. The year before against India, the same thing happened. Then day 2 and 3, and by 4 it starts deteriorating again. But day 2 and 3 are your big batting days, and where runs can be scored quickly at a stadium like the Optus and at Perth, where it's fast and bouncy. But England didn't bat long enough to kind of find that out effectively, and that's the sort of terrifying thing, is that then therefore the England bowlers weren't rested because they bowled at the start of the day to get Lyon out, and then they were bowling by tea. I think I can't remember specifically when the last wicket for England would have fallen. So if you don't give the bowlers a rest, I think I've seen people worrying about the bowlers' speeds. It's like they didn't get a chance to be off the pitch for any kind of time at all. So they were coming back on straight away. And that's where you link back into that old adage, old wisdom point of like, if that's what Test cricket was always about, is if you bat for long periods of time, you give your bowlers more of a rest, because bowlers get you the 20 wickets to win a test match. So if you bat so fast, even if you're getting runs, that you don't rest the bowlers, which has happened in Bazball times, that they've batted so fast that they kind of therefore don't bat long enough periods that bowlers get rests that you would get in a normal test match. And even if you're on top, which they obviously weren't when they got bowled out for whatever it was, 130 in that second dig, that if you're not ahead of the game and you've batted quickly, you get the worst of both worlds, is that you've got a smaller target to defend and bowlers who are tired effectively. So yeah, it's difficult, and I realise I'm falling into the rambling moment, and I guess that's where the kind of it's still feeling incredibly fresh as an England fan is probably very obvious from my perspective. I guess another wrinkle, and I think a thing that a lot of England sort of, again, commentators and pundits are getting very het up over, and I can totally understand, is should have England sent any batters for that extra warm-up game? So they've announced that they're sending Potts, Tongue and Bethell for that warm-up game against Cricket Australia 11 or the Prime Minister's 11. I don't actually know which one it is. And just the rest of the team will be the Lions. I think that's the thing which has really riled up Jonathan Agnew. I think a lot of other commentators will join him on that front. I think Vaughan was very keen on it as well. Is that there's now so much space between now and Brisbane. There's a pink ball test going on, or not test, pink ball first class match going on. Why can't you send all your batters? Especially the ones you haven't had a chance to get out in the middle. Even someone like Joe Root. And they haven't done it. They've stuck to their guns, and they've just sent the kind of bowlers who need maybe some overs, and Bethell, the young star boy who they want to get as much batting in Australia / just anywhere as they can. I am actually not as hard line on it as maybe a Jonathan Agnew or a Michael Vaughan has been. I can sort of understand why they haven't, and you don't want to change the total routine because you just got smashed on one afternoon's play, excuse me. But in the same sense, I can totally understand Agnew's point. But to me, I think it's more of like a redirecting of lightning. I think the lack of preparation beforehand is now being kind of redirected towards, well, now this has all happened, you should do this. I kind of agree that Bazball, the setup, the McCullum-Stokes setup shouldn't have changed what their original plan was, but I think the original plan was wrong. So I guess I'm sort of halfway between the two. I think it's a tricky one. I want to know what their sort of preparation otherwise is going to be. I think a lot of England cricket ex-pros have found the training schedule very difficult. I know Peterson famously always saying things for clicks or whatever, but he once killed England for it when they were touring India, with the lack of sort of preparation and time in the nets that they were spending in between matches and all of those sort of things. So even so, should England try and set up another intra squad game? They've got so much time until Brisbane. It's hard to know. It's hard to say. It's again, I think it's all so fresh that I think so many England commentators and fans are just still processing, and I'd really trying to work out where to go and what they should think. I don't know. I think I kind of understand it from the setup, but I also think if you're not going to practice hard, if you're just going to, obviously the joke has become if you're just going to play golf, then I think that is ridiculous. I think if they do train really hard and they do put themselves through the paces and give themselves enough time to relax into the week where they're playing in Brisbane, but they've trained hard in that in between, I don't mind it. But I think if they don't, again, you're just going to have a consistent sort of stream of media being against you. And of course, you've already got the Australian media against you because you're in the Ashes and you're away, as you kind of should be. But you're kind of starting to lose the England media because you're alienating them by basically saying their old logic is stupid and old-fashioned, which is what a lot of the has-beens comment, I think, obviously riled a lot of people up and ruffled a lot of feathers from Stokes before the series. Yeah. So again, more of me just sort of presenting all the issues without any solutions. I guess I'm not the one who seems to be having those solutions, but it's still a lot going on to try and sort of to unpick and unwork out. And then the last thing I was sort of had as a talking point is a long time between tests a good or a bad thing for England in this situation. I think for Australia it doesn't really matter. I think they could have another test straight away because they've just smashed England, but they also them having more time for someone like Cummins to work himself back to fitness. I think I've seen reports that Hazelwood is worse than they even initially thought the second time. So again, it might not be he's back, but Cummins I think is almost certainly going to be back. So again, they have another amount of time to rest, recuperate, work out where they're going to be. So I think for Australia, either way it works. I think for England, it's more of a case of, now I think about it, would it be better for them to just not have all the time for all of these things, media preparation, to be shot at them? Or is it better that they can kind of go regroup and they go, okay, things didn't work. We'll have time to mourn, for lack of a better phrase. But now we've got to work out what we need to do to win 3 more test matches. And I think that's the interesting thing. I think if England are honest enough with themselves, they should be having serious conversations around how they perform under pressure and how they change their game plans throughout the fixtures. I think the issue is, that there is a lot of stubbornness. There is a lot of, people have said it, but I think there is a fair amount of arrogance in their setup and thinking, we do it in a way we like doing it and we think it works. And when it works, everyone loves them. Like, let's not forget that as England fans. I think it's very easy to. So I actually think a longer time might be better. I think it might give them time to be sort of less emotional about it and more like, understand what we did wrong. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. Who knows? Maybe that will prove to work, and England will pull off the most unlikely of upsets at Brisbane. But it's safe to say it will be a massively unlikely upset. Another interesting thing is that Australia obviously only announced a test squad for the first test. So again, it will be a totally different squad for Brisbane. But whether or not that will just mean Cummins is coming in for one of the bowlers coming out, or if Khawaja's back problem is real enough for them to just get rid, or if it's kind of a good cover for them to just say, we're going to get rid of Khawaja and put Head up top, or do whatever, put whoever they think is going well. Because I think, Matt Renshaw scored another Sheffield Shield 100. He was who I picked to be the opener with Khawaja. But it seems that they're going to stick with Weatherald, which I think seems fair. But I think Khawaja might head out, and whether or not Renshaw might come into the squad and Khawaja come out, but they might still just go Travis Head, Weatherald, and then go with Bo Webster in the middle order. It'll be interesting. All the cards, all the sort of momentum is in the Australians' hands. So it's going to be down to this Bazball setup, to this England setup, to try and wrestle it back. And as an England fan, I hope they do. And I also think as sports fans, I'd hope Aussie fans would look at it and being like, I hope that England can just show up and be better other than opposition. Because again, I think Australian, I've lived out Australia for a bit of time. They find it frustrating when they have to test summer where, a Pakistan is out there and maybe a West Indies are out there and the games don't even become close. I mean, admittedly, West Indies won a test when they were last there, and Pakistan, I think, did fairly well. But when there's not real much on the test matches, the Australian public kind of lose their interest in it. And the Ashes is usually the opposite of that, and obviously the Indian series. So fingers crossed. I think I hope for more competitive days of cricket and more maybe just days of cricket that don't just span a whole test match in one day. We just actually have days of test cricket where it just feels like a test match and a game actually progresses, and it's not like I'm watching highlights on 4 times speed. I guess is what I'm hoping for. To begin with, I went with the strong optimism of any England fan, maybe, who had convinced himself that this was a good time for England to win. Australia, the kind of consistent dominating force, was waning or whatever. After this Test match, we've been well and truly humbled, and it's been tough to take. But I think hopefully England can kind of regain themselves a sense of self, and maybe pull off an unbelievable upset, because I think it would be truly this Bazball era to go from sort of a massive letdown, for lack of a better phrase, to then somehow go to the place where England very rarely win, go to a pink ball test where Australia have never lost, and somehow pull out a result. Who knows? I think it's safe to say the game will move quickly there as well. So it'll be interesting to see. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough, but I think this is a nice little first test, little sort of post-review, post-mortem, if you're an England fan. So I hope you enjoyed watching. Make sure you subscribe, like, all of those good things, follow wherever you might be watching from. It's been really good in the last few weeks. The Ashes content has been getting a lot of people interested in watching some content. So I really appreciate any new followers and any new support. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you very soon.